Welcome. I'm very excited everybody could be here. I'm Susan Lennox, and I am the president of IMCAT. And we had our board meeting and kind of threw some ideas out, and this one stuck. You know how with some board meetings, some things can be done very quickly and others take a little time. So within like a month, we put this together. So I appreciate everybody being here. I hope that it'll be a good morning for all of us. We do have some IMCAT board members here. You guys raise your hands. Thank you very much for taking your time out. They are here for questions and answers also, just like you are. So as we progress through the day, we will be kind of bouncing ideas back and forth. I do have cards out on the table, some index cards. If you have a question that you just pops in your head, write it down. And we're going to have different categories and different topics. And at the end of the topic, we'll say, what kind of questions did I not answer? Because hopefully in the conversation, I have to give you some information. I actually will be able to answer some of those questions for you. You have your agenda today. You have the PowerPoint presentation. And then we have a couple other handouts that we're going to talk about through the presentation. So I just wanted to let you know that on your the PowerPoint, we do have all of our board members and their emails. So please, please ask the questions to our board members. We are very eager to understand your thoughts and how we can make this situation that we're all in work. These are the topics, the agenda today. We're going to talk about district team players. The team is the word that TEA put together a few years ago, and it's different roles, different people within the district. And as a coordinator, I don't do just all of the decision making. I have others that help. So we're going to talk about their roles in making those choices. Talk about purchasing laws, the quotes and bids that pertain to the IMA fund. We're going to talk about, of course, EMAT. What does it look like? I have the PowerPoint of slides that are in EMAT or of EMAT, so you can take those back with you as a reference tool. But then once I go through the PowerPoint presentation, I actually will go into my EMAT screens and I will show you what we do for a living. And then of course we're going to talk about that deferred billing that is notorious. That's the word, you know, the phrase of the year. So we're going to talk about that, okay? So we're going to get started. Before I go into all of the information here, I would like to introduce a few people that are on my team in the district. We've got, you know, curriculum. Of course, they drive so much of what you all do for the districts. We have our district coordinators, finance, the instructional staff, those teachers, and the different people that are out on the campuses, purchasing department, superintendent, technology. And so Susan Hayes is here this morning for just a little bit. Susan is the person that I work with day in and day out in curriculum. We kind of are the bridge between curriculum and the distribution and the buying of the materials and things like that. So as you can, I mean, we talk almost every day, if not 2 or 3 times a day, depending on what we're doing. I also have Ray Weaver with me today. He is our director of purchasing, and he is going to do the purchasing, talking about quotes and bids and the different information that the districts need from you guys. So he's going to be working with us today too. So thank you very much for being here. Okay, curriculum I put at the top. It's alphabetical, but it is, I think, the most important one. I am the district coordinator for the state. Every district has a textbook coordinator on file with the state. But that doesn't mean that I do everything that helps you all do what you do, okay? Susan is my point person, and she actually works with me and takes more of the team lead in this part of what we have to do. We do district review committees. You guys have been very busy. Once October, December, March, you're going, who hasn't seen us? Who has seen us? Have we gone to the region centers? That type of thing. Each of the districts finds a different way to see your topic, your products. And Susan is the one who works with the coordinators of that subject, this year science and math. And she says, okay, which materials do we need to see, who do we need to call in. She puts the committee together. We get our people from the campuses, and they formulate the review committee, and she sets up all of those times. The progression is different in every single district. If you talk to every single one of your districts, it's probably done a different way. We have different people that might come into my district because Susan has set up a session with one of you guys, but somebody in Richardson didn't get to go and see something there, so they might come and see our presentation, and vice versa, and things like that. So you're gonna see a lot of crossing over of those battle lines, if you will, to make sure that we do see the materials that you need, to show us. The campuses, of course, take all the materials back to them, their place, and look at it, and they check things off, and they look at the TEKS, and they look at all the standards, and then they come back, and usually they're working with Susan and the curriculum department on what their choices are. At that point, they go to the board. We're going to talk a lot about the board. I freaked Ray Weaver out yesterday, our purchasing director. Man, he's keeping me online. Called up and said there's a purchase order that I'm supposed to approve, and I don't see it went to the board. And so I had to show him the board information of where he can find that data. So I was good to go, Susan was good to go, and we could do that purchase order. So we've got a lot of things behind the scenes that are happening before you all even can get that purchase order, that golden ticket, okay? And then, of course, you all work with the curriculum department on professional development. So once we've chosen the materials we want to choose, then we work with the publishers, and we set up times during the summer to do our trainings. We need to make sure we are writing in the TEKS and the STARS that are, so they drive everything we do. And Susan does that also. She works with the curriculum department, and they get all of that together. I do talk to the publishers, but you can see the other Susan does so much of this, and it drives what I then have to do. And I sit in meetings with them. Susan, can you come and sit in this meeting? Or we have this question. So there's a lot of behind the scenes back and forth that's going on. So as a district coordinator, I oversee the funds. I oversee the money. Does that mean I get to spend the money? Not necessarily. I can give them ideas. I can give them, I saw this quote come in. This is a better price. Oh, we're not supposed to do shipping on that because it's this type of product. And so that's where, as the coordinator, I come into play, okay? She'll send me a quote for something, and I'll say, well, I need this information before I can put it into the system, which is what I'm going to show you this afternoon, in a little bit on the IMCAT, okay? I might set up times where my team get together, or I pull the information because maybe they can't talk to each other because they're in other meetings, and so the question is this, and I have to be the one to go and get all the answers from each of the team players. And then we pull it together. So I'm kind of that liaison between everybody. And of course, I work with TEA. We have a question for TEA almost weekly, as we did this morning, setting up. Everybody's interpretation of something, either a law or a process or a guideline or whatever, everybody's interpretation of that and definition of what they're trying to tell us is different. And so as a district player, as the president of IMCAT, I get on the phone and I talk to TEA quite a bit. That takes that off of Susan and some of the curriculum department that might have those questions, and then I feed that back to them. Okay, finance. I can't do anything unless finance approves it and purchasing approves it. So when you guys send us those quotes, you might send it to me, you might send it to Susan, you might send it to maybe the superintendent. It's a smaller district, and so you're actually working with the superintendent. Whomever you're sending that to has to discuss it with the finance department. In my district, my finance department is one of the read-only access in EMAT. We have 4 opportunities in the district for someone to be an EMAT. 2 read-onlys and 2 people who can actually do work in the EMAT system. And Susan has one of the read-onlys, and my budget manager has the other. And it's great because they can now go in and look at reports or look at the information that they might have a question on if I'm not in the office. If my finance director wants to do something right now while I'm talking to you guys, she's got to wait for me to finish. But because I gave her read-only, she can get into that information. Finance and purchasing work together to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row and that we've given the information to our board properly. So when you all give us quotes or you're working with us on a bid, you might get frustrated because we have to go back and forth and back and forth. It doesn't say this and it doesn't say that. And you might say, gosh, don't they know we have a job too? But because the board has an expectation and we have to follow laws, we do have to go back and ask for that information. Maybe today, by the end of the time today, we might be able to give some guidelines or some ideas as to what you all could put on your quotes as a given. It's something that you could do as a whole company that would help us not have to ask those questions, okay? Because it's all about that communication before we need the answer. Talked about instructional staff. Gosh, teachers, they're passionate about what they do. And they have great ideas. And they used to love all those puppets and fluffy things. But it is about content. And what is the student going to get out of that content? That's what our job is. And so when we do our review committees, Susan does a great job pulling people together that use the content that's in front of them. We don't want a biology teacher looking at first grade science material. It defeats the purpose. So we try and make sure that the instructional staff that comes out of the buildings is going to be the best choice for the material review, the knowledge that's in there, and see if that's the best thing for our kiddos, okay? Talked about purchasing a little bit, and Ray is going to go over. It's the part that no one ever likes to really listen to. For those of you who, and I can say that because I love it. For those of you who work with me in this district, they know I'm operation. I'm policy and procedure. You give me something to read, and I read it. And I'm the one who finds that it should say maybe and not yes, or, did you really mean to say this and not this? I love that kind of stuff. And so when Ray will call me up, well, I need to talk to you about that. Great. What do we need to talk about? I love that law, but it can be kind of boring for some people. So we're going to try and make it as a happy a time today as we can, but it is necessary. So it'll be 30 minutes well spent, okay? But he does oversee the bid processing. I'll chuckle at myself. I tell him, tell me when I do something wrong because I want to be able to pay my house note, okay? That's his job, to make sure I keep my job and I do it correctly so that I can go pay my bills, because that's what it's all about. So he oversees all of that for us. Superintendent takes care of, well, everything, but they're great delegators. And that's why we're here and they're not, okay? They delegate out, and some of them in the smaller districts, they do get into EMAT, and they are the ones who are actually ordering. And then there's others that are major districts, and that person does not. The one thing they are definitely required to do is sign the certification form. We as coordinators in the EMAT system cannot do any ordering. We cannot order anything until the superintendent and the school board signs our certification letter, which we will talk about. And once TEA gets that form, that is when they actually give us access to our EMAT system. We can't do anything until we get that, okay? So some of you guys will call me or you text me. I mean, with the district right now, they can't see any of the new products. What do I need to tell them? Ask them if their superintendent and their school board has signed their certification form and they've sent it in. Okay? So, and that usually, and I usually don't get a second text. That's usually what the problem is. Technology. How many of us thought 3 years ago we'd have to be talking about technology and what we do? Used to be we'd order books, and that was it. And then technology department did their thing. It's all encompassed now. And our IMA fund oversees the technology needs in that district. And we have to balance it. It's a real song and dance. What are your needs? What are your needs? We're going online version of this. Well, we don't have a computer for the student to learn off of, so why are you doing that? So it is a fine line of balancing out. So we work with our technology department. We ask quite a few questions to you guys. And one of the handouts is a 3-page, I'm going to steal this one here. Oh, thank you. The commitment form. We as a board, IMCAT, got together and we discussed what kind of questions do we need to know to be able to pick the materials that are the best thing for our district. And most of this couple-page document are technology questions. And you all have technology people that work in your companies. And these might be questions that you could give to them because we need these up front. This is another tool so that question and answer doesn't have to happen the whole time. We could actually get some communication up front, which is helpful to you guys. We won't ask as many questions. We won't leave as many voicemails for you that says, I need you to get back to me just right now because I'm in the meeting right now and I'm about to walk in and I need my answer, right? How many of you guys get that? Yeah. So if you look at this document, you could take it back and you could say, these are some of the questions that the state of Texas has come up with that they need to know the answers to be able to formulate the best decisions for their district. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to EMAT also. Okay, that's our team. Do you guys have any questions or any comments on the people that play an important role in our district but are your partners, as I say, partners in crime, in doing all of this? Any questions, comments? Okay. Moving along, Ray's going to come up now, and he's going to talk about purchasing and the different information that the districts really need to be able to get from you guys, and give you a little bit of insight, too, of what the state of Texas asks of us that you might be able to feed to us. So I'm going to mic him here real quick.
Perfect.
And
that goes forward. All right.
Yeah.
Knowing which button to push is the key thing for any presentation, always. Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here with you. I am Raymond Weaver. Sometimes I'm the most popular person in the room, and other times, most of the time, not. If you've received a purchase order from it, you have my name at the bottom right-hand corner. So that's good for you. If you see my name, now you can put a face with that name. Not only is my name on there, but it becomes my responsibility. Not only do I oversee the bidding process, but I also oversee the approval process for those purchase orders, those wonderful pieces of paper that come to you that mean money coming into your company. So, as Susan mentioned yesterday, I looked at a purchase order. There's a fairly large disbursement of funds, and I'm going, wait a minute. When did that go to the board? Because we've got several processes in place that we have to follow. So we're going to talk about a few of those this morning. Make one quick correction. Mark out MOND in my email address. It's just ray.weaver. Feel free to email me if you have questions. I will get to it at some point. Sometimes there are a few hundred emails in my inbox. Sometimes it takes a day or two, just like Susan that's already left. We do get a lot of information coming our way. Email is a good way to contact me because then it gives me time to be able to respond. Sometimes I have to do a little bit of research. So, purchasing. What do we do in the purchasing department other than just sit around signing 35 or 40,000 documents? No, I don't hand sign all of those. Our system takes care of that. I made one card, they loaded it in so the purchase order is automatically signed when it prints. But 35 to 40,000 pieces of paper. Now, y'all don't get that many because not only are we dealing with instructional materials, we're also buying chicken nuggets, we're buying tanker loads of diesel fuel, we're buying 40 some odd truckloads of paper every year. So my purchasing group's a pretty active group. There's 7 of us that stay pretty darn busy for 8 hours every day and sometimes more. So if we don't get back to you just real immediately, it might be because we're dealing with chicken nuggets or bread or milk that didn't get delivered yet. But that's the fun part of our job too, because we get to deal with a wide range of things. My group was laughing at me the other day. I was going from floral and decoration bids to synthetic turf for some baseball fields to a concrete project. So I get to think about a lot of things in a given day's time. What does that have to do with y'all? Let's talk about purchasing. Our basic statute comes from the Texas Education Code 44.031. Any purchasing person worth the salt can quote that thing forwards, backwards, and knows it point by point because this is what the legislature tells us that it's our responsibility to ensure is done. Now, a lot of times, folks on y'all's side of the table look at this as an impediment to doing business. Yeah, but I don't have any choice. It's not optional. It is state law. So I have to furnish that. So basically, I have to follow that. So basically, the key points are, we have a threshold of $50,000. Anything in excess of $50,000, we have to go out for a competitive process. Now that's $50,000 in a 12-month period. In Plano, Texas, I interpret that to be my fiscal year. Other districts may interpret that differently, and it's totally fine because the law does not specify it. It says in a 12-month period. For a group of goods or services, we call that a procurement commodity or a commodity group. Instructional materials is the bucket we call that deals with y'all. But I also have one for food. I also have one for teaching supplies, for office supplies. So we have to categorize those groups of goods that we buy. And it's not just for one school or one department, it's for the entire district. So if I'm Blue Ridge ISD and office supplies, I might be able to go a whole year, 12 months, without having to do a bid for office supplies because I don't have that much money to spend. But guess what? In Plano ISD, we can sneeze on the first day and spend that $50,000 buying office supplies, or maybe the first week of a fiscal year. So there are differences. All of us have to accumulate to that same $50,000, but in Blue Ridge, it may take all year. In Plano, it may take a week. So size of the district that you're dealing with is critical. You need to be aware of that. We have to go through a competitive process. Now, part of the competitive process that y'all go through deals with the state, and they come through with an adopted list, and once that's adopted, then that pretty well takes care of my part of this. We have a few other issues or a few other things that we go through, and everybody says, but we're the exception. No, there are only 2 exceptions to my purchasing law in 44031, and that's fuel and produce. I don't necessarily have to go through a formal process each time I want to buy a tanker load of diesel. I do because it makes good business sense and I can demand better pricing that way. In fact, I might buy an entire year's worth of diesel fuel just so that I can drive a better price. Makes a difference whether you're buying a tank full, 15 gallons, or whether you're buying 500,000 gallons of diesel fuel. You get a little better price if you're buying 500,000 gallons, so go figure. Produce is kind of the same way. So that's the basic statute that we deal with every day, all day. What competitive processes can we use? We can do a bid, which basically, if I'm going to do chicken nuggets, that's the process I'm going to use, because one, I can describe a chicken nugget, I know how many I need, and we can send that to our vendors and they can understand that it's a certain size, it's a certain composition, and I need this many of them. So they can offer me a solid bid price that doesn't fluctuate for a given amount of time. With books, that might not work so well. With a lot of the other instructional things that we do, or a lot of the other processes we do, that doesn't work real well because there are a lot of variables. So the state gives us requests for proposals and competitive seal proposals, which that allows us both to change the scope of what we're doing the competitive process for. It also allows us the ability to negotiate both price and how many we're going to buy. So the difference between a bid is it's fixed, can't change it. You submit it, I have to, if I accept it, then that's what we're both going to live with. With an RFP or a CSP, then we have some flexibility. We can negotiate. If I buy an extra 100,000 of those units, can I get a little better price? Those are the sorts of things that give us a little bit of flexibility in some of the process. We also have something called sole source. Sole source is either very good or very bad. And some days I think it's very bad, and other days it saves us. Sole source, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, gives us some other opportunities because we know everything can't be funneled through one size whole. We know there's some variations out there. And cooperatives. Cooperatives are one of the other key pieces that I'm going to talk about just a bit, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about cooperatives. So let's move along. Sole source. It is written into the law as an option to supplant a bidding process. It says that if it is a single source, that eliminates the competition. Well, all of you think you're sole source, right? Because something distinguishes me. We're sales folks, and we're going to give you the very best service, and that just makes us sole source because we're unique. No, not so much. You may be all those things, but not so much as far as 44031J tells us. What I look for when I get a sole source letter is I want to see that there is a copyright, a patent, some sort of secret process, or a reason for a monopoly. Now, we think monopolies are bad things, but if you think about it, your Atmos gas comes in, you don't get a choice, right? Your water bill comes in, you don't get a choice usually. Electricity used to be that way, but now then we can bid electricity and we can do it in our homes too. So take it on a personal level. Sole source is Atmos gas, or City of Plano supplying the water that comes out of my tap, because they are a monopoly. There's no other place I can buy that. So what are we talking about? Generally, it's going to be films, manuscripts, or books, or captive replacement parts. And I like to use the example of my international bus fleet, which we have 280 some odd buses sitting on a parking lot out here. They do require repairs. Now, if it's generic like tires, I can buy those from a lot of different places. But if there are a lot of parts on that bus that I can only buy from an authorized international dealer. They're the only people that have them. They're the only people that make them. So that becomes a sole source in effect, doesn't it? So captive replacement parts. What if I've got a server farm and only certain pieces will work in that server farm? Then that becomes a captive replacement part. When I get a sole source, one of my quick checks is to Google it. Google is such a powerful tool, isn't it? We all use it in our daily lives. Well, purchasing folks do too. If you say you're sole source, I'm going to Google that title, or I'm going to Google your company. I'm going to see how many other things come up related to that. And then I'm going to do a little research to see if truly that book or that manuscript is the only place I could get it. So Google is my friend. Cooperative purchasing. There are a bunch of cooperatives available. Now, I listed a couple, 3, 4, that we use on a fairly regular basis. There are tons more out there. And the first thing sales reps normally tell me is, oh yeah, I'm on the buy board. Well, I hear that. Y'all say that. I hear that as being, I signed up to receive bid notices from the buy board. My first question is always, okay, were you an awarded vendor on one of the buy board bids? And I get a real blank look. No, we just signed up to get the bid notices. Well, have you gotten any notices? No, not yet. Well, then you're not an awarded vendor yet. You have to go through a bidding process, a vetting process with the co-op, and they'll send you a letter of award. And once you have that letter of award in your hand, then you're an awarded vendor. That's a mistake I hear a lot, and my peers hear a lot. There are groups of purchasing people, just like all the folks in this room, that we get together and sit and talk to. So we hear these sorts of things, and it's a common issue. The first thing most sales reps do is go sign up, and then that makes me an awarded vendor. No, you have to participate in a vetting process, okay? Each one of those that I listed there has some little different process. They're all going to do probably an RFP because that allows them some flexibility. They have to follow basically the same laws that I do. They have to advertise, they have to go through certain processes. It's not just mail in 2 post toasty box tops and your letter of application and you're done. Because if that's the process they use, then that doesn't meet my needs because that doesn't fulfill Chapter 44031 of the Ed Code. Buy board, how many of you work with buy board? Yep, a few of you. Great organization. They're actually supported and hosted by the Texas Association of School Boards. So when we send something to our school board for their approval, that's their association. They feel pretty comfortable that the buy board has done a good process. Also, the lady that runs the department was my supervisor for a number of years, so I know she runs a good process. She knows what the bidding law is. TCPN, the Cooperative Purchasing Network. Any members here? Any awarded vendors? Couple? Same thing. You have to register, you have to receive their bid notices, you have to participate. And when I say bid, I'm using that term universally. All I'm referring to when I say bid is a competitive process because it may be a request for proposal, a competitive seal proposal, or a bid. Okay? EPC&T. Here in North Texas, we have a group called the Educational Purchasing Cooperative of North Texas. There are 60 school districts that we have gone together and formed our own purchasing cooperative. So if Plano ISD does an RFP and we have a group of vendors awarded and someone at Garland or someone at Fort Worth ISD need to use that vendor and buy those particular goods through an interlocal agreement, we can do that. So that's good for all of us, both y'all and us, because it does make it a bit easier sometimes because it's used in place of each of us having to do our own bid. Doesn't really make sense. One of the reasons, one of the first projects the EPC&T did as a cooperative was we all gathered our number of cases of paper that we were buying, 8.5 by 11 copy paper. We pooled all of our purchases that we had purchased in the last year, figured out how many cases that was, and then we went out for requests for proposals. Now, instead of just Plano bidding 840 cases times 40 truckloads, we joined with Garland, Dallas, Richardson, Mesquite, Arlington, and we pooled all of that so that we could bid that as a pool. Imagine how the buying power changed. It's not just me, Plano, standing on my own, buying those 40 truckloads. Now it's all of these districts buying several hundred, up above 500 truckloads of paper. Price got very competitive that way. So that's one of the values of using a cooperative. It lets us pool our buying power. Buy Board has a very good instructional materials bid. They've got a huge section of awarded vendors. It helps all of us. Each member district of EPC&T does the same thing. It gives us more opportunities to be able to tell Susan, yes, go ahead and make the purchase. It's legal. We've got it covered. That's what I like to be able to say. I don't like to be the one behind the desk saying no all the time. Even though I get put in that position a lot, it's okay. The co-ops give us a lot of tools to be able to use so that we can make purchases from you guys a little cleaner, a little quicker. TIPS is the interlocal purchasing system. They're out of Region 9, I believe it is, up in Far East Texas. They used to be in Mount Pleasant. They moved to Pittsburgh, I think is where they're actually housed now. Thank you. Can't keep up with all of these. Anyway, they're another cooperative that a lot of districts in North Texas use. If you work out of Central Texas, there's the Central Texas Purchasing Authority, CTPA. Round Rock, I believe, is one of the major hosts of that. Same thing. A bunch of school districts right in Central Texas, around the Austin area, got together, said it's in our best interest to pool some of our resources and do our bids. So we're not having to do 50, 60 bids. We can do one on behalf of the entire group. That's the beauty of cooperative purchasing. TEA, as I mentioned earlier, we have the adopted materials list and the bundles. There's a letter that recently came out, dated May 16, 2014, that talks about it. If the bundles are acceptable, there's some conditions. Once all that happens, then that takes care of the bidding process. I don't have to go through that vetting process. But there's always that, isn't there? If the materials are not on that adopted list, then we've got to go back to either a co-op, a bid, or whatever we're going to use. We've got to go through a competitive process before we can make that purchase. So it's just like Susan and I hit yesterday. All right, so you're sole source, and I've got the letter, and I've approved it, and now we're going to spend $60,000 for something. Within Plano ISD, my board policy now makes me do one more step. I've got to go before the board and get their approval. I can make a recommendation to purchase that $60,000 worth, but they have to approve it before I can make that purchase. That's what Susan and I were discussing yesterday. We had the competitive process taken care of, but we also have to square that with our board policy, which says that any purchase in excess of $50,000 has to be approved by the school board. I do an instructional materials bid. I think we're in our second year, and we're talking about whether or not to extend it for the third year or go out again. The board approved that initially, so we don't have to go back for any more approvals. But if it's a freestanding sole source or freestanding co-op bid, then I've got to take it back to the board. So just understand there are always more steps, and each district is different. We all use the same law, but each district in the state of Texas does it a little differently, as y'all probably well know. So, how to deal with school districts. My own personal things, sign up to receive bid notices. Just about every school district in the state of Texas has a web presence of some level. Plano ISD, you could go to www.planoisd.edu. You can do a web search, get to the purchasing web page, and I promise you there's more information there than you'll ever want to know about purchasing. Because we try to give y'all free communication, make it easy for you to do business with us the right way. Sign up to receive our bid notices. Just because you signed up doesn't make you an awarded vendor. And we get that all the time. Oh, yeah, I'm an awarded vendor. I just signed up last week. Well, did you go to? No, hadn't done any bids yet. We use an electronic bidding process for most of the things we do. Once you sign up, you'll receive an emailed bid notice. You can open that up. You can sit in your pajamas anytime, day or night, fill out your bid, and submit it. You don't have to come up, you don't have to mail, you don't have to do anything else. We try to make it as easy on y'all and us as we possibly can. So the electronic submission of bids is something more and more school districts are going to, because it's good for y'all, it's good for us, and it gives us a good firm track of who did what and when y'all did it. And it's also pretty darn accurate, and instead of having to tabulate 200 or 300 or 400 line items of stuff, take several weeks to do that, I can tabulate it in a matter of seconds. It's wonderful. It becomes a great use of time. And folks, y'all are taxpayers. I'm supported by taxpayers. Anything that makes me more efficient is better for y'all because we're spending less time at it. It makes it more reasonable for y'all. Each district is different. Go talk to them, find out what their process is for registering vendors. Talk to them about their bidding process. I would check, if I were a young sales rep starting out, or a young entrepreneur starting out, the first thing I would get is a computer and web access, and I would start doing web searches to find out who these people are, where they are, and how to contact them. And for us, we put all of our information out there, but if you need to come in and talk to us, please make an appointment. It's just, it makes life so much easier. If you just drop in on me to visit with someone in the purchasing department, generally we'll come out to the foyer, shake your hand, hand you a business card, and ask you to make an appointment. If it's an emergency, true emergency, then we will accommodate, but it's much better for us and for y'all if you'll call in, make an appointment, and we'll sit and talk to you. We'll give you some time, get you in touch with a particular buyer. I don't touch, well, I touch all of the bids, but I don't actually day-to-day work with all of the bids. We'll have a buyer assigned to groups of goods, and I think Janice Hodges is generally the buyer for most of the stuff that y'all will be furnishing or dealing with. So either Janice or I. But there again, that's all listed on our website. Makes it very easy to find. Questions that I can answer for you. Susan, did I burn up enough time, or do you need me to? I mean, I've done this for 6 hours before. It's not a problem. I can continue. My pleasure to come out this morning.
Thank you, Ray.
The old process was, we listened to you guys and you told us all your great stuff, and the district chose, and we went to the board and we said this is what we want, and then we went into IMCAT and we ordered it, and the state sent us one per student, and the only thing we had to worry about was, were we using our multi-list codes correctly? We were ordering off level. How do we do? Those were the little questions we had. So the one thing that I really would like you all to remember on our side is that if it is not a requisition, which is state adopted materials, if it goes in as a disbursement, the question will now be, do we have to get a quote or bid? You know, do we have to look at the bid? Do we do a quote? Do we do a sole source? Do we have to take it back to the board and get the approval of anything over $50,000? And in my district, my board approves once a month. And guess what? During the summer, they don't meet. So Susan Hayes yesterday was freaking out because we thought that we hadn't followed our rules, and the board's not meeting except for one more time before the summer. We would not have been able to get those books in the district legally. No, we wouldn't have been able to do it. I'm not going to break the law. Susan's not going to. So all of the questions that we get answered up front from you guys, from the Ray Weavers in all the districts, the Susan Hayeses in the districts, all of these different players, If we can get those answered beforehand and know that we've done our due diligence, then the process is so smooth once we then can go in and order and we can get the books in and we can get them delivered and all of that type of thing.